Monday. 9 o'clock sharp. 36th floor of the Wentworth Group headquarters. Just past the peak of the morning rush. The office hummed with the usual sounds. Keyboards clacking. Printers whirring. Coffee machines dripping. Just like any ordinary workday. Then the company-wide email went out. From Human Resources Center. Subject: Personnel Adjustment Notice. President's Office. Most people clicked it open out of habit, ready to scan and close. But the next second, the entire office erupted like a drop of boiling oil hitting cold water. The email was only a few lines long. After company review, it has been decided that new assistant Ethan Grant is appointed as special assistant to the president, reporting directly to the president. Compensation: monthly salary of $300,000. Effective immediately. $300,000 a month. Not annual salary. Not quarterly bonus. Not signing bonus. Every month. $300,000. People stared at their screens, stunned. Some counted on their fingers and went pale. $300,000 a month. $3.6 million a year. More than what many department VPs made in total compensation. Did I read that right? $300,000. He just started today and he's making $300,000. Who the hell is he? A president's special assistant is worth that much. Even if it is. That's insane. VPs don't make that much. The murmurs spread like a tide. The air thick with restless energy. The admin department spread the news first. The new guy, Ethan Grant, was a top-tier overseas returnee. An MBA from a prestigious school. With a resume that looked practically gilded. Vivian Wen herself had personally recruited him. I heard President Wen really admires him. Says he has strategic vision. And he's good-looking, too. Very polished. With that kind of profile, maybe $300,000 makes sense. What do you know? He's top-tier talent. Some were bitter. Some envious. Some nodded along. Others stayed silent. In the far corner of the tech department, Cole sat at his workstation, staring at his paycheck that had just synced to the system. One simple line. Almost embarrassingly sparse. Code maintenance technician, Cole. Current monthly salary, $5,000. $5,000. For 3 full years. Never increased. He stared at the number. His expression was calm. As if he were looking at someone else's payslip. But the fingers resting on his mouse tightened. Knuckle by knuckle. 3 years ago, Wentworth Group's cash flow had been on the verge of collapse. The systems were a mess. Approval chains riddled with holes. The supply chain platform barely functional. Cole had joined the company and built the Polaris system from scratch. The core architecture was his. The middleware was his. The database was his design. The front-end and back-end integration was his work. The operations scripts. Disaster recovery logic. Permission loops. Risk control interfaces. Every line had been typed by his hands. One by one. Over those 3 years, Wentworth Group had signed 23 core clients. Every single one of them ran on the system he had built. On the surface, Vivian Wen held the company together. But the foundation. That was him. Now, he made $5,000. And a new assistant who had never written a line of code. Never managed a project. Never even touched the core systems. Made $300,000 a month. 60 times more. It wasn't just a difference in numbers. It was a valuation. Vivian Wen's crystal-clear valuation of him versus Ethan Grant. The coworker in the next cubicle glanced over and whispered, "Cole, did you see the email?" Cole grunted in acknowledgement. This Ethan Grant guy. $300,000 a month. That's insane. Cole didn't respond. He just closed his paycheck and stood up. The coworker blinked. "Cole, where are you going?" "The president's office." His voice was flat, as if he were delivering a routine file. But the entire tech department went quiet for a moment. Everyone knew how low-key Cole had been these past 3 years. He never fought for credit. Never competed at meetings. Never postured. System failure. They called him. Client API down. They called him. Server alert at 3 a.m. They called him. He was like a nail. Hammered silently into the most inconspicuous place. Holding the entire technical infrastructure together. Now, that nail was standing up. Outside the president's office. The secretary saw Cole approaching and made a half-hearted attempt to stop him. "Mr. Cole. President Wan is reviewing documents. I just need 2 minutes." His tone wasn't aggressive, but the secretary instinctively stepped aside. He knocked and walked in. Inside, Vivian Wan sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, reviewing papers. She wore a sharply tailored dark suit, her expression composed, her features clean and sharp. She looked like someone who always placed efficiency and rationality first. She glanced up at the sound. Something wrong. Cole placed a printed copy of the email on her desk. "Ethan Grant. 300,000 a month." Vivian glanced at it. Her tone even. "Yes. And." No explanation. No preamble. As if answering the most ordinary question in the world. Cole looked at her. "I've been here 3 years. I make 5,000. He's been here 1 day and he makes 300,000. Vivian set down her pen and looked up at him. "You've heard about Ethan's background. Top-tier MBA. Complete overseas experience. Investment banking and consulting background. As a special assistant to the president. He's worth that price." "Worth that price?" Cole repeated. "Yes." Vivian leaned back in her chair. Her expression unchanged. "The president's special assistant isn't an ordinary role. He'll be directly involved in my daily decision-making. Interfacing with management. The supply chain. Client strategy. The requirements are high. And me. You're a code maintenance technician." Those 5 words came out of her mouth like a dull blade, slowly cutting into bone. Cole stared at her. "A code maintenance technician. So I'm only worth 5,000. Vivian's brow furrowed slightly. As if she didn't understand why he was pressing this today. "Cole. Different positions have different value. Where's the difference? His work determines the company's strategic efficiency. Your work is execution and maintenance." Vivian's tone was almost clinically cruel. "In the market, maintenance roles fall into this salary range. The company isn't a charity. Compensation is based on position value. Not tenure. Position value. Is that not clear?" Cole laughed softly. It wasn't really a laugh. More a quiet, bitter release. As if he'd just been completely seen through. "Vivian. Do you know who wrote the Polaris system?" Vivian paused briefly, then regained composure. "I know you contributed a lot." Contributed. Not wrote. Not led. Not built. Just contributed a lot. Cole looked at her. The last warmth in his eyes slowly fading. "Who built the main supply chain pipeline? Who restructured the approval permission layer? Who wrote the database disaster recovery? Who made sure all 23 core clients could run stably? On whose system?" With each question, Vivian's brow tightened a little more. But she didn't follow his lead. She just said flatly, "Cole. Technology is important. I've never denied that. But don't exaggerate your personal contribution to the point of irreplaceability. The company can function without anyone." The words hung in the air. The office fell into an almost suffocating silence. Irreplaceable. All those late nights. All-nighters. The stomach bleeding. The times he'd come back from the hospital to keep coding that in her eyes. It all came down to the company can function without anyone. Cole nodded slowly. "Got it." Vivian seemed to think he'd finally ended this pointless argument and picked up her documents again. Her tone lighter. "If you came here today to compare salaries with Ethan Grant, I can only tell you there's no comparison. He's the president's special assistant. You're a code maintenance technician. Your current salary matches your position. Matches your position." Those 6 words cut deeper than the salary gap itself. Cole stood there for a few seconds. Then asked, "What if I'm not satisfied?" Vivian barely gave it a second thought. She flipped through her documents and said lightly, "Then you can leave." Can leave. 3 casual words. No attempt to keep him. No buffer. No let's talk about this. Like she was processing a low-value, replaceable piece of office equipment. Not satisfied. Then leave. Cole looked at her for a long time. She didn't look up again. She didn't seem to realize what she'd just said. In her mind, he really was just a maintenance tech making 5,000 a month. Quiet. Stable. Useful. But not important. Ethan Grant was worth 300,000. He was worth 5,000. That was her answer. Cole said nothing more. He turned and walked out. The secretary stood outside, instantly aware something was wrong. She opened her mouth but didn't dare ask. He walked back to his desk, sat down, opened a new document. The screen's white light cast a cold glow on his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then began to move without hesitation. Resignation letter. Header. Body. Signature. No complaints. No accusations. No negotiation. Just the most standard, calm line. For personal reasons, I hereby request immediate resignation. He printed it. Signed his name. The whole tech department had gone quiet. Everyone saw it. But no one dared speak. The coworker next to him whispered nervously. Cole. You're really quitting. Cole closed the document. Yeah. But the system. Someone else will handle it. His coworker opened his mouth. Then closed it. The word sounded like a standard handover. But somehow they landed with an unsettling chill. Cole carried the resignation letter back to the president's office. This time, he didn't bother knocking for long. Vivian looked up, saw him, and there was a flicker of impatience in her expression. Something else. Cole placed the letter on her desk. Resignation. Vivian glanced down at it. Just one glance. She didn't ask why or if he wanted to reconsider. She picked up her pen, flipped to the signature page, and wrote 2 clean words in the approval field. Approved. The strokes were sharp and steady. Not a second of hesitation. Like she wasn't approving a resignation, but an insignificant expense report. Cole watched those 2 words and felt the last thread of attachment in his heart snap. 3 years at IT really only took 1 second to end. Vivian pushed the document back to him. Businesslike. HR will process the paperwork. Since you requested immediate termination, we'll treat it as forfeiting the transition compensation. Cole took the letter and gave a slight nod. Fine. Just that one word. No emotion. No ripple. Vivian felt something off and looked up at him again. But Cole had already turned away. His back was straight. His steps steady. He didn't look like someone quitting out of spite, that he looked like someone who had finally made a final decision. He returned to his desk and began packing. An old computer. A black thermos he'd used for 3 years. A resilient little potted plant. And a few notebooks full of architectural sketches. 3 years. And in the end, it all fit in one backpack. Someone couldn't hold back and whispered. Cole. Maybe think about it some more. President One might just be busy today. Cole zipped up his backpack. No need. Another coworker couldn't resist. Honestly. Everyone thinks Ethan's salary is ridiculous. If you pushed back, you might get. It's not about not getting it, Cole said, looking at him with a calm like ice. I don't want to fight anymore. Not out of spite. Not as a threat. Not waiting for her to ask him to stay. At this point, fighting was meaningless. He slung the backpack over his shoulder, picked up the potted plant, and walked toward the elevator under a flood of complex stairs. As he passed by the president's office, Ethan Grant came from the other direction. White shirt, charcoal slacks, gold-rimmed glasses, a warm, polished smile. Every inch the elite professional. He spotted Cole and, as if he'd heard something, gave an exaggeratedly surprised smile. Cole. Heading out early. The respectful Cole sounded polite, but the hint of superiority and satisfaction underneath was poorly hidden. Cole didn't stop walking. Just gave him a flat glance. Congratulations. Ethan's smile widened. All thanks to President Wen's appreciation. I'll be leaning on you for system support going forward. Cole looked at him. Eyes unreadable. No, you won't. Ethan blinked. What do you mean? I resigned. With that, Cole walked past him into the elevator. The doors slid shut. Ethan's smile froze for a moment. He clearly hadn't expected Cole to leave that decisively. Cole stood in the descending elevator. His expression unchanged. The numbers ticked down floor by floor. Like the 3 years peeling away from his connection to the company. On the ground floor, the sunlight was harsh. He walked through the revolving door, stood on the steps, and looked back at the tall Wentworth Group logo. The silver letters gleamed coldly in the sun. Beautiful. Polished. Impressive. But beneath that gleaming exterior, the invisible foundation. The part no one saw. Was built line by line with his code. Now the one who wrote the code was gone. And those upstairs still thought they just fast approved a $5,000 maintenance tech. Cole looked away, pulled out his phone, snapped his 3-year-old work SIM card in half, and tossed it into the trash. The autumn breeze carried a faint chill. He walked down the steps with his backpack and plant, without looking back. At that same moment, on the 36th floor, Vivian was listening to Ethan's report. Ethan's tone was smooth. President 1. I just ran into Cole at the elevator. I heard he resigned. Vivian didn't look up. That's sudden. Won't that affect the system? Vivian flipped through her documents. Unbothered. One maintenance position. The tech department has plenty of people. It's not like the company will fall apart without him. Ethan lowered his eyes, hiding a flicker of something unusual. Then smiled. True. You've always had great judgment. Vivian didn't respond to the flattery. She signed off on a file and casually tucked Cole's resignation letter beneath a stack of papers. Like it was just another ordinary sheet. She didn't know she'd just approved not just a resignation but the first domino in a storm that would shake Wentworth Group to its core. She didn't know that Ethan's question, won't that affect the system, wasn't casual concern. It was a fine needle, gently probing a nerve that should have set off alarm bells but didn't. Vivian finally glanced up. Effect. Her voice was dismissive. One maintenance position. The tech department isn't useless. Ethan smiled, still perfectly composed. I was just worried about the transition. Cole was here for 3 years. A lot of the underlying logic. Only he really knows it. It was perfectly phrased. Like a reminder. Like responsibility. Like a newly appointed special assistant thinking about company risk. But Vivian just capped her pen. Her tone hardening. Company processes don't revolve around any one person. If the system collapses just because someone leaves, that doesn't mean he's important. IT means management failed. Ethan nodded. You're right. He said it with a faint smile that came and went so quickly Vivian didn't catch it. Outside the office, the admin director, Sophie Taylor, happened to walk in with documents and caught that exchange. She paused. She'd worked under Vivian for 2 years. She knew how low-key Cole was. And she knew that when the tech people talked privately about the system, the name that came up most wasn't the department director or the project manager. It was Cole. But she looked at Vivian's expression and said nothing. Just placed the folder on the desk. President 1. These are the executive meeting materials for tonight. Leave them. Also. Sophie hesitated. For Cole's resignation. Should we expedite the HR process? Vivian opened the folder without looking up. Process it as immediate termination. Revoke his permissions tonight. Yes. Sophie stepped out. Her heart inexplicably heavier. The undercurrents had been subtle. But they were already in place. Because no one expected Vivian not only to approve it instantly, but to refuse even 1 day's buffer. Ethan stood nearby, casually adding, should I oversee the permission revocations? Since I'll be interfacing with the president's office systems anyway, it'd be good to get familiar. Vivian finally looked at him. Not with suspicion. With approval. Fine. Coordinate with the tech department and map out all permissions relevant to the president's office. Understood. And, Vivian added, if Cole has any issues with this, ignore it. He chose to leave. The company doesn't owe anyone special treatment. Ethan nodded respectfully. Got it. He said it with courtesy. But he filed the words away carefully. Doesn't owe anyone special treatment. That also meant doesn't have to guard against anyone. Night settled in. Wentworth Group Tower blazed with lights. In the tech department, people gathered around screens, pretending to handle routine tasks while privately buzzing with talk. Cole really left. The HR system shows the resignation as fully approved. President 1 approved it that fast. Instant. Not even 5 seconds. Someone lowered their voice. Do you think the Polaris system is actually going to break? Don't jinx it. But a lot of the core stuff was just Cole handling it alone. Tech Director Victor Zhang came out of the meeting room, caught the tail end, and scowled. Everyone got nothing better to do. Everyone immediately ducked their heads. But Victor himself felt uneasy. Because others might not know. But he knew a little more. The Polaris system was technically maintained by the whole department. But the only one who actually touched the core architecture was Cole. Not because others didn't want to, because they couldn't. The structure was too deep, too complex, too tightly integrated. Like a precision machine. Any outsider reaching in blindly risked breaking it. Everyone had always assumed Cole would be there forever. So no one had seriously considered what would happen if he wasn't. Now he was gone. Victor rubbed his forehead and sent Vivian a message. President 1. I recommend having Cole at least provide a core module transition checklist. In case of system emergencies. The reply came in under a minute. No need. The tech department can handle it internally. 8 characters. Victor stared at the screen. His chest tight. But there was nothing he could do. What he didn't know was that in the underground parking garage, Cole had just put his last box of personal items in the trunk. The potted plant sat securely in the passenger seat. His phone was silent. No messages asking him to stay. No calls asking for an explanation. Like those 3 years had always been him waiting. Waiting for her to see him. To acknowledge him. To treat him as anything other than the guy who fixes the system. But it had never come. Cole got in the car. Gazed at the Wentworth building for a moment. Then started the engine and drove into the night. His phone buzzed shortly after. A message from Iris Yee. Heard you finally left. Cole glanced at it and replied with 2 words, yeah. Left. She wrote back quickly, 3 years. Hard to let go. He gripped the steering wheel. His eyes calm. Almost flat, not about letting go. It was just time. Iris paused a few seconds. Then sent. She paid $300,000 for a showpiece and kept you for 3 years at $5,000. Cole. You've done more than enough. Cole didn't reply. Some things that when someone else says them, they hit harder than saying them yourself. 3:57 a.m. Wentworth Group Data Center. The on-duty engineer was fighting off yawns when the first red alert flashed across the monitoring wall. Approval main chain. Response timeout. He blinked. Confused. Before he could check it. A second. Third. And fourth alert exploded across the screen. Database connection pool. Exception. Supply chain interface. Disconnected. Client mapping node. Offline. Cache cluster. Load surge. Then the entire monitoring wall turned blood red. Holy shit. The engineer's coffee smashed onto the desk. He shot up. Call everyone. Polaris is down. Phones. Intercoms. And alarms blared in unison. 4 a.m. The entire tech department was rushed back to the office. Victor Zhang burst into the data center. Sweat on his forehead. His jacket half on. What happened? The on-duty engineer's voice cracked. It's not a single-point failure. It's the full chain. Approvals. Supply chain. Client APIs. Risk modules. Everything's dropping. Backups. Can't fail over. The underlying logic validation is failing. Logs. Logs are flooded. Can't even scroll through them. Victor looked up at the monitoring wall and went pale. This wasn't a normal error. It was a terrifying. Chain reaction collapsed. Like the foundation had given way. The front-end pages were still there. The database was still running. The servers were online. But the logical connections inside the system had been appended from the deepest level. The hardware wasn't broken. The system couldn't recognize itself. Emergency meeting. Now. Victor shouted. All team leads in the conference room. 5 minutes. 4:20 a.m. Vivian was woken by her phone. The caller ID, Victor Zhang. She answered with a frown. Her voice still cold from sleep. What? Victor practically yelled. President 1, Polaris has completely collapsed. She sat up straight. What? Not partial. Complete. The approval chain is dead. The database is in exception. All 23 client interfaces are timing out. The supply chain is frozen. The monitoring wall is entirely red. Vivian's face changed. She threw off the covers and got out of bed. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later. She walked into the company's main control room. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. A wall of red alerts. The entire monitoring screen looked like it was bleeding. Alerts stacked one on top of another. Scrolling so fast it was dizzying. Approval chain broken. Client connections lost. Orders backed up. Inventory sync failing. Risk rules disabled. For the first time. She was witnessing this scale of a system catastrophe at her own company. Recovery plan. Her voice was cold. Victor's face was grim. Still diagnosing. How long to recover? No one answered. Vivian's voice rose. I asked how long. A database engineer finally forced out the answer. At least 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Vivian couldn't believe her ears. Do you have any idea how much the company loses for every day Polaris is down? 2 weeks. What am I supposed to tell our clients? Dead silence in the meeting room. Then a back-end team lead gritted out, President 1. It's not that we won't fix it. It's that we can't understand it. Vivian froze. What do you mean? Can't understand it? Victor's throat tightened. He finally said the words no one wanted to say. The Polaris core code. No one can fully understand it. Why not? Vivian's eyes were razor sharp. Your department has all these people. What are they even doing? Victor's face was ashen. Because the system. From the core architecture to the middleware to the database. The interface layer. And the permission loops. Was almost entirely written by one person. Who? The answer was already on the tip of her tongue. But she asked anyway. Victor lowered his head. Cole. The air seemed to freeze. Vivian felt a buzzing in her ears. Her mind going momentarily blank. You're saying. What? The Polaris system. The core parts were almost all built by Cole. Victor's voice grew quieter. We've been maintaining it on paper all these years. But the only one who actually touched the core logic was him. The tension had officially escalated into a full-blown crisis. Vivian stared at him. And for the first time, genuine loss of control crept into her voice. He's just a code maintenance technician. Victor gave a bitter smile. That title, at this moment, sounded grotesquely ironic. President 1. Maintenance technician is just a job title. It's not his actual role. Then why didn't anyone tell me? He did. From the corner. An engineer couldn't hold back. Cole mentioned it many times. Needed documentation. Knowledge transfer. Permission splits. More people to take over the core. But it never got pushed through. Why didn't it? The engineer glanced at Victor and didn't dare continue. Victor had to force it out. The president's office once approved a directive, code maintenance technicians don't need extra resources. Just keep the system running. The color drained from Vivian's face. Inch by inch. She remembered that line. She'd approved it herself. At the time. She thought the tech department was always pushing for processes. Standards. Budgets. Too slow. Too wasteful. She wanted results. Cole always delivered. So she defaulted to assuming he'd keep delivering. Now, the one who always delivered was gone. The system was in ruins. Can we bring in outside consultants? She tried to hold herself together. Victor shook his head. Outside teams won't help. Without complete documentation. Architecture specs. Permission maps. They won't even know where to start. What about backups? It's not the data that's broken. It's the logical chain. Like a building. All the bricks are there. The cement is there. But the load-bearing wall is gone. That was more direct than any technical explanation. Vivian stood there. Her fingers slowly turning cold. For the first time, she realized that what she'd approved yesterday might not have been just a $5,000 maintenance tech. It might have been the foundation of the entire building. Then the client relations director burst in. Face white. President 1. 7 core clients have called asking why approvals are frozen. 3 overseas partners have sent formal inquiries. They want restoration within an hour. Vivian snapped back to reality. Pulled out her phone. And dialed the number she knew by heart but had never really made a point of calling. Cole. First call. No answer. Second. No answer. Third. Still no answer. Her hand started trembling. But she forced her voice to stay calm. Keep calling. 4th. 5th. 10th. Each long, empty ring felt like a slap in the face. Throwing her own words from yesterday back at her. You can leave. Victor and the tech team stood there. None daring to speak. Because now everyone understood one thing. The company couldn't function without anyone. At least not without Cole. Vivian gritted her teeth and kept dialing. 18th. No answer. 20-6th. No answer. 33rd. Still no answer. She finally couldn't suppress the tremor in her voice and muttered under her breath, Cole. Pick up the damn phone. But on the other end, only the cold, automated ringing remained. Exactly the same treatment she'd given him when he stood at her desk yesterday. Not satisfied. Then leave. Now he was gone. And for the first time that she was panicking. But panic didn't solve anything. The main control room was still flashing red. Alarms kept blaring, hammering at Vivian's temples. She gripped her phone and kept dialing. 30-4th.no answer. 35th. Still no answer. Her breathing grew faster. Her fingers went white. Keep checking the failure points. Don't just stand there. Yes. The tech team scattered. But the look on every face was grim. Because everyone knew that checking wasn't the issue. The issue was that no one could navigate the system. Polaris wasn't an ordinary system. It was like an intricate, sprawling web. It ran smoothly when everything was intact. But if the core logic broke, it wasn't just about fixing an interface or restarting a server. It was the entire web collapsing from the skeleton outward. Victor stared at the logs. His voice tight. President 1. This collapse wasn't a single point of failure. It looks like both the underlying permission chain and the core logic chain failed simultaneously. Simultaneously. Vivian shot him a sharp look. Someone tampered with the system. That question drew the attention of several engineers. The undercurrents surfaced again. A back-end lead hesitated. Then said, President 1. Ethan Grant came to the tech department yesterday. He said you'd asked him to familiarize himself with the president's office systems. And he requested some permission documentation. Vivian's brow furrowed. He asked for documentation. That doesn't mean he could touch the core code. No, theoretically he couldn't. Victor picked up the thread. His face even grimmer. But there was an abnormal access entry recorded last night. Through an expedited approval channel. Who approved it? No one answered. Then Sophie Taylor stepped in quickly, carrying a stack of freshly printed process logs. Her face pale. President 1. I found it. Yesterday at 5:12 p.m. a temporary co-investigation authorization was added to the President's office. Covering the interface layer, log layer, and some permission mapping layers. The approver was you. Vivian froze. She reached out and took the documents. A quick scan. And her face instantly changed. She remembered. Yesterday afternoon, Ethan Grant had come in with a checklist, saying the president's special assistant needed to familiarize himself with the system collaboration processes to coordinate with client meetings and supply chain decisions. He'd asked her to sign a temporary co-investigation authorization. She'd been busy reviewing documents, hadn't even looked closely, and signed it without thinking. Now that signature had come back like a boomerang. Hitting her squarely in the face. It's just partial permission mapping. Her voice was cold. But a crack had already appeared. That shouldn't have caused a full system collapse. Victor nodded with difficulty. By itself. It shouldn't have. Then what are you saying? Victor looked up. Sweat beading on his forehead. I'm saying there's more than one reason for the failure. Cole resigned. The underlying protection logic lost its maintainer. Ethan Grant got partial co-investigation permissions. And then triggered certain pathways that shouldn't have been triggered. Both things happened at once. And that's why it exploded like this. He'd phrased it cautiously. But everyone in the room understood. It wasn't just a technical accident. It wasn't just a resignation. It was Vivian herself. She had approved the resignation of the person who wrote the code. And then approved access for someone who shouldn't have had it. Out and in. In and out. Both happened on the same day. Vivian's face went paler by the second. Then her phone buzzed. It wasn't Cole calling back. It was a message from an unknown number. A picture message. She opened it. And her entire body locked up. The photo showed Ethan Grant in the underground parking garage, handing a black USB drive to a man in a cap. The timestamp showed 11:26 p.m. last night. Below the photo was a single line of text. President 1. The $300,000 per month hire doesn't look like an assistant. Looks more like a mover. The control room went silent. Sophie saw the change in her expression and whispered. President 1. Vivian handed her the phone. Sophie looked at it. And her hand trembled. Who? Who sent this? No one knew. But one answer floated in everyone's mind. Ethan Grant was compromised. Victor's reflexes kicked in, quick. Pull the parking garage security footage. Check all entries and exits from 11 p.m. to midnight. Yes. The tech team scrambled. But just as the footage started loading, a rapid, orderly footstep sound echoed from outside the control room. Not employee footsteps. Clean. Precise. Carrying an irrepressible sense of authority. The door swung open. The first person in was a woman in a white suit. Her heels clicked on the floor. Crisp. Hard. Each step landing on everyone's nerves. Iris Yee. Behind her came an entire audit team. 2 legal advisors. And 3 plainclothes officers who flashed their badges. Vivian's pupils contracted sharply when she saw her. Iris Yee. What are you doing here? Iris looked at her. Her gaze icy. I came to see exactly how much your $300,000 elite import has helped you hollow out your company. One sentence dropped the temperature in the control room to freezing. The major conflict had officially detonated. Vivian's face darkened. This is Wentworth Group. Not Ye Capital. Who gave you the right to barge in here? Barge. Iris gave a faint smile and slapped a document on the conference table. Economic Investigation Cooperation Request. Data Preservation Order. Joint Audit Authorization. Which one would you like to see first? The legal department rushed over. Scanned the papers. And their faces turned pale. They were all real. Vivian stared at the documents. Her voice icy. What exactly have you found? Found out you're blind. Iris said calmly. Every word a blade. And that the so-called elite you brought in for $300,000 isn't elite. He's a spy. The control room fell dead silent. Victor's pen clattered to the floor. Sophie froze in place. The monitoring wall continued to flash red. As if underscoring the statement. Iris gave no one time to recover. She signaled her team to turn on the projector. The screen switched. First page appeared. Ethan Grant. Real name, David Young. Dropped out of community college. Second line. Fake overseas MBA. Purchased for $6,000. Third line. True identity, corporate spy for Hongyuan Group. The room exploded. What? A fake degree. A spy. Vivian stared at the screen. The blood draining from her face. Impossible. Impossible. Iris looked at her. Then keep watching. Second page appeared, bank statements. On Ethan Grant's first day at Wentworth Group. $300,000 was deposited as salary. After taxes. $180,000 was split into 2 payments of $90,000 and transferred to 2 offshore accounts within 48 hours. Iris's voice wasn't loud. But it was crystal clear. You thought that was his salary. It was funding. The $300,000 you gave him wasn't to hire talent. It was to launder money for a spy. The humiliation wasn't just a slap. It was a full-body takedown. Sophie covered her mouth. Her face white. Victor felt his blood run cold. Vivian's voice was hoarse. Bank transfers alone don't prove anything. Then how about this? Iris raised her hand. Third page, an audio transcript. Enhanced for clarity. Ethan Grant's voice came through the speakers. Dripping with undisguised triumph. That idiot Vivian actually gave me $300,000 a month. And now the codes crashed too. Perfect timing. Another male voice asked, crashed. How did it crash? Ethan laughed. Cole left. Who's left to hold it together? Polaris was all him. He leaves. The system collapses. No surprise. The other voice, she gave you $300,000. What did she give Cole? Ethan paused half a second. His laugh growing louder. $5,000. 3 years. Never increased. The recording reached that point. And no one in the control room dared breathe. But it wasn't over. This MBA I bought for $6,000. She bought it. International vision. Strategic thinking. Stick on some labels and she thinks it's worth $300,000. Vivian only sees the shell. Not the core. She paid $300,000 to keep me. Someone stealing her code. And $5,000 to the guy writing it. Perfectly stupid. The recording ended. Absolute silence. Vivian stood there. Pale as paper. Her lips trembling. Yesterday. She'd personally said, his qualifications and background are worth that much. Now that statement had turned into the evidence used to slap her across the face. Iris looked at her. Word by word. Cold and merciless, you spent $300,000 on a fake degree. A fake overseas returnee. And a real spy. You spent $5,000 on the person who wrote your entire system. That, Vivian won, is your judgment. The verdict landed. Vivian's legs gave way, and she gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. But the worst was yet to come. An economic investigator stepped forward and presented their findings, based on current evidence. Ethan Grant illegally copied 34 Wentworth core files within 6 hours before the system collapsed, including client mapping tables, approval rules, supply chain parameters, and some source code. 34. Victor whispered. Not 47. Another engineer asked instinctively. Iris looked up, her gaze carrying something deeper. Because the remaining 13 that he didn't get. Vivian's head snapped up. Why? Iris looked at her. Speaking slowly, because when Cole left, he triggered the underlying protection mechanism. Upon resignation, core data was automatically locked. Those last 13 files. No one can access them. Not Ethan Grant. And not you. Vivian stopped breathing for a moment. Yesterday, when she'd instantly approved his resignation, she thought she'd just processed a $5,000 maintenance tech. Now she knew. Her signature had not only removed the foundation. It had also triggered the final line of defense. The system crashed. Data locked. A spy had stolen some. But the 13 most critical files were still sealed. And the one who'd done it was the same person she'd just dismissed. Sophie finally broke the silence. Her voice trembling. So, Cole protected the company even when he left. Iris turned. Her gaze fixed on the blood-red monitoring wall. Yes. He wasn't leaving out of spite. He was cutting his losses. Even when you paid him $5,000. Even when you approved his resignation instantly. Even when you personally let a spy in the door. He still locked down the last 13 core files before he left. Otherwise, today wouldn't just be a system failure. It would be the death of Wentworth Group. The control room fell silent. A silence heavier than any noise. Because everyone realized the same thing at once. Vivian's $300,000 hire was a thief. And the $5,000 employee she just approved to leave was the last person still guarding her door. Iris looked back at Vivian. Her voice steady. But like the final knife, $300,000 for a spy. $5,000 for the person who wrote a billion-dollar codebase. That's what you call judgment. The words landed like a hammer. Vivian slumped back into her chair. As if all strength had left her. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The screen was still lit. On it, her 47th call to Cole. Still unanswered. The control room was suffocatingly quiet. The fallen phone screen still glowed. The name Cole burning like a hot needle in Vivian's eyes. But what hurt worse were Iris's words from moments ago. He wasn't leaving out of spite. He was cutting his losses. Even when he left, he was protecting the company. Vivian sat in her chair. A cold chill spreading down her spine. Her fingertips losing all warmth. Yesterday, when she'd signed approved, she'd thought she was just letting go of a disgruntled employee. Now she realized she'd signed away the last person still covering Wentworth's back. And she'd done it after paying Ethan Grant $300,000 and Cole $5,000. The slap wasn't delivered by anyone else. It was delivered by the facts. Iris didn't look at her. Just raised her hand. Seal the meeting room. Notify all VPs and above. Emergency executive meeting in 15 minutes. Economic investigators, legal, and audit teams are to sit in. Sophie blinked, instinctively looking at Vivian. Vivian's lips were white, but she couldn't bring herself to object. At this point, she had no ground left to stand on. The legal director was the first to react. I'll notify everyone. Also, Iris turned to Victor. Her voice sharp and decisive. Create mirror backups of all Polaris servers immediately. No one is to restart, overwrite, or delete logs without authorization. Anyone who does is responsible. Victor nodded quickly, understood. That was the biggest difference between Iris and Vivian. When things went wrong, Vivian's first instinct was to call someone to fix it. Iris's first instinct was to secure evidence, control risk, and assign responsibility. One panicked. One didn't. 15 minutes later, the top-floor conference room at Wentworth Group was blazing with light. Every executive's face was grim. Some had been woken by early morning calls. Some had rushed straight from last night's business dinners in their suits. And others had already gotten word through private group chats about a major disaster. But none had expected it to be this severe. The main screen lit up. First slide, Ethan Grant's absurdly fake resume. The conference room was silent. Iris stood at the front, her white suit cutting a sharp silhouette. She looked like a drawn blade. No preamble. This emergency executive meeting covers 3 things only. 1. Ethan Grant is not an overseas elite. He's a corporate spy. 2. 100% of Polaris's core code was not a team effort. It was written by one person, Cole. 3. Wentworth Group's total collapse today is not a simple technical accident. It's a complete failure of management judgment, evaluation, and authorization across the board. Each sentence landed harder than the last. Like a hammer on the table. VP Richard Zhou couldn't hold back. He frowned. Ms. Yi. This is a Wentworth internal meeting. As someone from E Capital, is it appropriate for you to preside? The undercurrents surfaced. Iris looked at him. Her gaze indifferent. Inappropriate. Her legal advisor immediately projected another document. E Capital. Convertible bond and risk backstop priority rights in Wentworth Group. Hongyuan competitive risk. Cross-audit authorization. Temporary emergency takeover recommendation. Iris said calmly, Ethan Grant's handler is Hongyuan. If Hongyuan uses stolen data to launch a competing product, E Capital's investment in Wentworth takes a direct hit. I am now both a risk mitigation participant and a submitting party in the evidentiary chain. She paused and looked at Richard Zhou. Any more questions? Richard's face froze. No one spoke. They all understood, Iris wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to clean up the mess. Wentworth wasn't in a position to question her suitability. Iris clicked the remote. The screen switched to the second slide. One line of text. It made everyone in the room stop breathing. Cole. Sole heir of the Cole dynasty. The room erupted. What? The Cole dynasty. Which Cole? The Cole. Cole. The maintenance tech. That Cole. Even Vivian, who'd been sitting there lost and dazed, snapped her head up. A look of near uncontrollable shock on her face. Impossible. Her voice was hoarse. Like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could he be part of the Cole family? Iris looked at her. Her tone flat. Not part of the family. He's the sole heir. That was even more devastating than the last statement. If part of the family just meant rich, sole heir meant unquestionable identity. Everyone in the business world knew what the Cole dynasty meant. It wasn't just wealthy. It was a top-tier conglomerate spanning finance, energy, defense technology, and overseas capital. And Cole was the sole heir. That man had worked at Wentworth Group for 3 years as a code maintenance technician. For $5,000 a month. In the room, some faces had gone pale. Especially those who'd once casually said tech roles are worth that much. Their scalps were prickling now. Iris didn't stop. She projected the third slide. 3 years ago, Wentworth Group's cash flow crisis sought assistance from the Cole family. Initial capital injection, $60 billion. Actual source, Cole's personal assets account. Dead silence. Some people wondered if they'd heard wrong. How? How much? 60 billion. Personal injection. Vivian's face was completely white. She'd always known that Wentworth had survived a life-threatening crisis 3 years ago with mysterious capital backing. But her father had only said someone helped. Told her to focus on running the business. She'd never known the source. It was Cole. Her husband. The man she'd paid $5,000 a month. The one whose resignation she'd approved in 1 second. Her lips trembled. Why? Why didn't anyone tell me? Tell you. Iris finally let out a faint smile. But it held no warmth. Because he didn't want anyone to. He said if you knew, you'd never treat him like a real employee. never truly recognize his abilities. He wanted to be seen in your world on his own merit. Not through the Cole name. Not through status. Not through money. But you never saw him. No one in the room dared speak. These words weren't just a slap. They were peeling back Vivian's confidence, judgment, and pride layer by layer. You thought he was lucky to have you. But actually, you were surviving on him. You thought his $5,000 salary meant that's what he was worth. But actually, taking that salary was him giving you a chance. You thought you'd just approved a replaceable maintenance tech. But actually, you'd approved the person who funded $60 billion. The author of your entire system. The foundation of Wentworth Group. Iris kept clicking. Polaris system. 100% core code written personally by Cole. Supply chain system. Source code copyright registered under Cole's personal name. 23 core clients. Signed under Cole's personal guarantee. 3 bank loans. Guarantor, Cole. 9 core engineers. Borrowed by Cole from the Cole Group infrastructure. With each slide, the pressure in the room dropped further. By the end, even breathing felt heavy. Victor sat below. Cold sweat on his face. He'd always known Cole was formidable. But even he hadn't realized the extent. This wasn't just a technical pillar. This was the entire foundation. Capital. Clients. Systems. Credit. Team. All of it had been supported by one man. Silently. From behind. And Wentworth's title for him. Code Maintenance Technician. Salary, $5,000. Absurd enough to be a joke. Richard Joe spoke again. His face ugly, since Mr. Cole. Since Cole has that kind of background. Why did he hide it for 3 years? Isn't that intentionally creating information asymmetry for the company? Several executives' hearts sank. He was shifting blame. Trying to pin Vivian's personnel failure on information asymmetry. But Iris just looked at him flatly. Information asymmetry. Fine. Let me ask you this. She tapped the screen. The Polaris system ran for 3 years. Didn't you know who wrote it? When the server alarms went off at 3 a.m., didn't you know who could fix it within an hour? Didn't you know why 23 clients only trusted Wentworth's interface stability? When the tech department had a major failure, who did they call first? And when he applied to write documentation? When his permission splits were shelved? When knowledge transfer was suppressed? Didn't you know about that too? Each question turned Richard Joe's face from red to white to ashen. Iris finally stopped. Her tone cold as a verdict. You didn't have information asymmetry. You saw his ability and chose to ignore it. Because he didn't compete. Didn't fight. Didn't flaunt his status. You assumed he was cheap and wouldn't leave. That's not asymmetry. That's arrogance. A public demolition. No one in the conference room dared defend themselves anymore. Because everyone knew deep down that Iris was right. Cole hadn't suddenly become important. He'd always been important. They just hadn't bothered to look. Vivian sat there. Her eyes slowly reddening. She finally remembered. Cole in the hospital with stomach bleeding. She'd visited for only 10 minutes and taken 2 calls. The day the system launched. After he'd worked 3 nights straight. She'd only said good enough. When he submitted a documentation request, she dismissed it with maintenance techs don't need extra resources. Yesterday, when he stood at her desk and said, 3 years. And I make $5,000. He makes $300,000 on his first day. She'd answered, your position is worth exactly that. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She'd said it herself. Every word was now echoing back. Slapping her across the face. Sophie couldn't hold back any longer. Her voice cracked. President won. That capital injection 3 years ago. Did the chairman know? The air in the conference room had turned almost solid. Sophie's question landed like a boulder into still water, sending ripples outward. Everyone waited for Vivian's answer. Vivian sat there, her lips moving. But no words came out. Because she suddenly realized something far worse. The $60 billion lifeline from 3 years ago. Her father knew. Her mother knew. A few of the board members who'd since stepped back probably knew too. Only she hadn't known. And she was the one running Wentworth now. Iris watched her pale face and said flatly, seems there are more things you don't know than you imagined. Vivian stood abruptly. Her chair scraped back with a harsh screech. I need to see him. Her voice trembled. But there was a stubborn, almost obsessive edge to it. Where is Cole? Iris looked at her. With neither mockery nor pity. Only a clinical coldness. Do you think he'll see you now? You approved his resignation in 1 second yesterday. Did you think about seeing him then? When you paid him $5,000 a month. Did you think about seeing him then? When you told the entire company his role was worth exactly that price. Did you think about seeing him then? Each question was a blade. Vivian's eyes were bloodshot. But she held back the tears. I owe him an apology. You owe him more than an apology. Iris's voice finally showed a trace of emotion. As if something long suppressed was slipping through. You owe him 3 years of recognition. Respect. And the acknowledgement he deserved. But what you need to do right now isn't find him to apologize. It's clean up the mess at Wentworth. Otherwise, you don't even have the right to stand in front of him. The words hit like ice water. Vivian froze. Then, slowly, she sat back down. Because she knew Iris was right. If she went to Cole now. Crying. Apologizing. Saying I didn't know. What else could she offer? She knew nothing. What right did she have to see him? She took a deep breath, pushing down the tightness in her throat. Her voice came out rough but finally steady. Fine. Let's handle the company first. Iris gave her a look of faint surprise. But quickly regained her composure. Then let's start. Over the next 72 hours. Wentworth Group experienced the darkest period in its history. The tech department worked around the clock. Victor led the team through Cole's code line by line, trying to rebuild the logic chains from the ruins. The legal team spent the night organizing the evidentiary chain, coordinating with investigators to pin down Ethan Grant's crimes. The finance department was taken over by Iris's audit team. Checking accounts, tracing funds, freezing suspicious transactions. And Vivian sat in her office, not sleeping for 72 hours. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was reading. Reading every line of code Cole had left behind. Reading the documents she'd once glanced at and signed. Now seeing what she'd missed. Night 1, she opened the Polaris development logs. They started 3 years ago. The first entry was 7 days after Wentworth's cash flow crisis. Framework complete. Target, full supply chain operational within 3 months. Behind it were dense technical parameters and time stamps. Vivian scrolled down, her hands shaking more and more. In those 3 months, Cole almost never took a day off. Commit records at 2 or 3 a.m. were routine. After 48 consecutive hours of work, a scrawled note appeared. Stomach hurts. Might go to the hospital tomorrow. The next entry was 3 days later. Doctor says stomach bleeding. Hospitalized for observation. Can't pause system progress. Remote access. Vivian stared at that line, her eyes burning. She remembered that time. Cole had been in the hospital. She'd visited once. Stayed less than 20 minutes. Took 3 work calls. And left with rest well. She hadn't even asked why he was hospitalized. Night 2, she opened all the requirement documents and technical proposals Cole had submitted over 3 years. 147 in total. Of those, 37 had been rejected. The rejection reasons were always the same. Budget constraints. Postpone. Non-core position. No additional resource allocation. Maintenance role. Absorb internally. Each rejection bore her electronic signature. Vivian stared at those signatures, feeling like she was looking at a stranger. How could she have signed these? How could she have dismissed so many proposals without understanding them? Sophie brought coffee, saw Vivian red-eyed and staring at the screen, and said softly, President 1. You should rest. It's been 2 days. Vivian didn't look up. Just asked, Sophie. When these proposals were rejected, did you ever remind me? A pause. Then, yes. Vivian finally looked up. When? Every time. Sophie's voice was low but clear. Every time Cole submitted a proposal and it was rejected. I added a note to your to-do list suggesting you meet with him in person before deciding. You never looked at them once. Vivian froze. She tried to remember. But couldn't recall ever seeing those notes. Because she was too busy. Or because, deep down, she didn't think a maintenance tech's proposals were worth her time. The answer was obvious. She lowered her head. Her voice breaking, I see. You can go. Sophie opened her mouth. Then closed it. And quietly pulled the door shut. Day 3 morning, Iris pushed open the door. She found Vivian asleep at her desk. A stack of printed code annotations beside her. 3 crumpled tissues on the table. Iris didn't wake her. She just placed a file on the desk and turned to leave. How is he? Vivian's voice came from behind. Hoarse. Barely recognizable. Iris stopped. Didn't turn around. Do you want the truth or comfort? The truth. Not good. Iris turned back. Vivian was sitting up slowly. Eyes bloodshot. Drained of energy. I've contacted the Cole family. Cole hasn't mentioned Wentworth. But his father, Edward Cole, already knows. His exact words, my son was treated badly at your company for 3 years. That debt will be paid in full. Vivian closed her eyes for a long time. And what did he say? He said nothing. Iris's tone finally held a trace of helplessness. That's the worst part. If he were angry, hateful, vengeful, that would be manageable. But he said nothing. Which means he doesn't care anymore. Vivian's fingers tightened. Her nails dug into her palms. The pain kept her awake. Doesn't care. Worse than hate. Hate at least has emotion. Not caring means you've turned the page. She'd been turned in his life. Day 4, major breakthrough in the Ethan Grant case. Investigators found an encrypted laptop in his apartment. Decryption revealed 34 copies of Wentworth Group's core data, plus a full Hongyuan competitive product plan. The plan detailed how Hongyuan would use Wentworth's data and supply chain parameters to launch a competing product within 3 to 6 months, directly targeting Wentworth's core business. The entire operation began with Ethan Grant's recruitment. Vivian read the plan. And a chill ran down her spine. If Cole hadn't triggered the underlying protection when he left. Locking down the last 13 files. Hongyuan's plan would have worked perfectly. Wentworth would have lost not just a system, but its entire market. She finally understood, when Cole left. He didn't just protect data. He saved Wentworth's life. And she'd known none of it. That afternoon, Vivian called a second emergency executive meeting. This time, she stood at the podium. She didn't let anyone else speak for her. She reported the case progress, system recovery status, and the corrective plan. Then she said something no one expected. These 3 days, I've read every technical document and proposal Cole submitted over 3 years. I found 110 optimization suggestions I rejected for various reasons. 40 of those, if adopted, would have prevented the system from collapsing from one person's departure. That was my failure. The room was silent. No one dared respond. Vivian continued, I'm not here to review myself. Reviews don't fix anything. I'm here to announce a decision. Starting today, Wentworth Group's tech center is elevated to a first-tier business unit, reporting directly to the CEO. The tech center head will no longer be appointed administratively. It will be based on internal technical ranking and open competition. The tech compensation system will abolish the position-based model and adopt a dual-axis evaluation of capability plus contribution. At least 2 core technical review meetings per year. CEO must attend. At the table, Victor's eyes reddened. These exact systems, Cole had proposed them 3 years ago. All rejected. Now Vivian was reading them aloud like a 3 years too late apology letter. But the person she was apologizing to was gone. Day 5. System recovery achieved a breakthrough. Victor and his team finally found the fix in Cole's code comments. President 1. At most another week. Core functionality can be restored to 70%. Vivian nodded. But her expression didn't relax. She knew the system could be restored. But trust that was shattered. That evening, she stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the traffic flow below, and suddenly remembered a fragment from 3 years ago. Wentworth had just survived the crisis. She was under immense pressure, often working late. One night at 2 a.m. she came out of her office and saw the tech department lights still on. She walked over and saw Cole asleep at his desk, a freshly drafted architecture diagram still under his hand. She'd stood in the doorway, watched him for a few seconds, then turned away. Didn't wake him, didn't put a jacket over him, didn't even say good work. She'd thought, Programmers work late all the time. Nothing special. Now she understood, it wasn't normal. It was someone carrying a weight she couldn't see. She pulled out her phone. Scrolled to Cole's number. Her finger hovered over the screen for a long time. Then she put it down. Because she knew, calling now. What could she say? I'm sorry. Too light. Thank you. Too late. I want to see you. She had no right. Day 6, Iris brought news. Cole is leaving the country next week. Vivian nearly dropped the cup in her hand. Where? Europe. The Cole Group's business there needs someone. Edward Cole wants him to familiarize himself for a while. Minimum a year. Maybe 3. If you want to see him. This is your last chance. Vivian was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Iris thought she wouldn't answer. Will he see me? I don't know. Iris was honest. But I can ask for you. Okay. Iris sent Cole a message in front of her. Vivian wants to see you. Before you leave. Are you free? They waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. The phone stayed silent. Vivian's heart sank. Just as she'd given up hope. The phone buzzed. Iris looked at it. Her expression complicated. Then she handed the phone to Vivian. On the screen, no need. Vivian stared at those 2 words. Tears finally fell. It was the first time she'd cried in 6 days. Not from hurt. Because she'd finally confirmed what she'd been dreading. She'd really lost him. The day Cole left. The weather was beautiful. Autumn sunlight flooded the airport departure hall. He wore a charcoal gray coat. Carried a small carry-on. Same as when he'd arrived. Light. Unencumbered. But this time. He wouldn't be coming back. In the waiting area. Iris was already there. I didn't think you'd come to see me off. Cole sat across from her. His tone easy. I didn't think I would either. Still. She looked at him. A complex emotion in her eyes. You joined Wentworth on my referral. Even if it was under a fake identity. Not entirely fake. He barely smiled. Code maintenance technician. That was my actual role. What were you doing for 3 years? Cole. She finally asked the question that had bothered her for so long. With your background and ability. You didn't need to waste 3 years at Wentworth. Your father didn't agree. You insisted on going yourself. Cole was quiet for a while. Looking at the planes taking off and landing on the runway. You know. I first saw Vivian 7 years ago at an industry summit. Wentworth wasn't big then. She was speaking about digital transformation for traditional businesses. She was good. Clear logic. Big vision. A light in her eyes. I thought, working with someone like that would be interesting. Iris was stunned. She hadn't known that was why he'd gone to Wentworth. So it was for her. Not entirely. Cole looked back. I wanted to prove something. That without the Cole name. I could still support a company's core. I did prove it. And I also proved something else. Some people. And no matter how much you give. They'll never see you. No resentment in his voice. Just a statement of fact. And that calm honesty made Iris's chest ache. She wanted to see you off. I know. Not seeing her. She'll regret it for life. Better she regret it forever than come see me out of obligation. Cole stood. Pulling his suitcase. Some relationships end when they end. Dragging it out isn't good for anyone. Have you really let go? He didn't answer. Just nodded at her and said. Take care. Then he turned toward security. Iris watched him go. His back receding until he was gone. She remembered a moment from 3 years ago. When Cole first appeared to her. Saying he wanted to join Wentworth. She'd asked why. He'd said, because there's something I want to protect there. Now, the thing he wanted to protect didn't need him anymore. So he left. Cleanly. Without looking back. At the same time. In the Wentworth Group president's office. Vivian stood at the window. Watching a plane's white contrail streak across the sky. She knew that plane wasn't carrying the person she was looking for. Sophie knocked and came in softly. President 1. The tech department reports system recovery is at 90%. Good. Also. Victor says. Based on Cole's comments. They found several underlying vulnerabilities they'd never noticed. If unrepaired, they could cause a second collapse within 6 months. Vivian turned. What else did he write in those comments? Sophie hesitated. Then handed over a printed document. This is the last line in his code comments. Vivian took it. It was a technical note. Written in the deepest core module. Simple. Just one sentence. I hope whoever takes this over does a better job than me. Vivian's vision blurred instantly. She could see Cole writing that line. No resentment. No reluctance. No attachment. Just a developer's final blessing for his work. He'd left the best he had. Then he'd left quietly. And she'd never even said thank you. 1 month after Cole left, Wentworth Group had transformed. The tech center became independent. Compensation reformed. Core data permissions reorganized. Knowledge transfer became mandatory. Vivian personally led the review of every rejected proposal from the past 3 years. Those with merit. Implemented. Those questionable. Peer reviewed. Those obsolete. Archived with rationale. She also did something no one expected. She had Cole's name engraved on the company honor wall. Not as a former employee. As system founder. At the unveiling, Vivian told everyone, this wall has always honored people who've created tremendous performance for the company. Today, I'm adding one more name. He didn't create direct performance. But he created the foundation on which all performance was possible. His name is Cole. I want every Wentworth employee to remember it. Because without him, there would be no Wentworth today. Some applauded. Some were silent. Some wiped their eyes. Vivian bowed deeply to the wall. It was 3 years late. But she finally did it. 2 months later. Geneva. Switzerland. Cole sat on a lakeside bench. Coffee in hand. Watching snow-capped mountains reflected in the clear water. His expression was relaxed. A rare sight these days. The past few months, he'd taken over part of the Cole Group's European operations. Busy every day. But his mind was lighter than before. Because he no longer waited for anyone's approval. No longer felt the sting of being overlooked. If he did well, that was that. If not, he improved. All the standards were back in his hands. His phone buzzed. Iris. You've probably heard about Wentworth's changes. Vivian went through every proposal you left. Implemented what she could. She even put your name on the honor wall. Cole read it. Didn't reply. A moment later. Another message. She asked me where you were. I didn't tell her. Still no reply. A third came. She said she's not asking for forgiveness. She just wants you to know she finally understands. Cole stared at that message a long time. Then he typed a few words. Deleted them. Finally. He sent one character. Good. He put the phone away. Picked up his coffee. And looked back at the mountains. A breeze came off the lake. Crisp with autumn. He realized that some things could really be turned over. Not because he'd forgiven her. Because he didn't care anymore. 3 months later. Wentworth Group released Q3 earnings. Revenue up 23% year-over-year. Net profit up 17%. More importantly, the tech center's independent operation and the stable new system had earned full confidence from core clients. All 23 renewed. 5 new overseas clients added. At the quarterly meeting, Vivian said, "This is the beginning of our transformation. But it's not my credit. It's the credit of those who worked quietly behind the scenes for 3 years. People I failed to see." She didn't name him. But everyone knew who she meant. After the meeting, Vivian went back to her office, closed the door, and sat in the dark for a long time. She picked up her phone, scrolled to the number she'd never called again. Her finger hovered. She put it down. Some people. Once you've missed them, you've missed them. All she could do was protect what he'd left behind. 6 months later. Hong Kong. Central District. A top-tier private equity gala. Crystal chandeliers. Clinking glasses. The hum of high finance. Cole stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in a tailored navy suit. Champagne in hand. Looking out at Victoria Harbour's night skyline. 6 months had fully transitioned him into the role of Cole Group's Europe head. Something in his bearing had shifted. Gone was the quiet, restrained maintenance tech. Now there was a steady, unhurried confidence. "Mr. Cole." Long time. A familiar voice. He turned to see Iris in a burgundy gown. A mischievous smile on her face. "What are you doing here?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why can't I be here?" She came to stand beside him. "E-Capital has business in Hong Kong too. Is it that surprising?" "Not surprising," he said, sipping his champagne. "But you flying in specifically to find me. That's surprising." She laughed. You're still too sharp. Fine. It's not me. It's Vivian. Cole's hand paused on the glass. Then resumed smoothly. What about her? Wentworth's in talks for an overseas acquisition. A German industrial automation company. Valuation around 8 billion euros. Wentworth can't handle that deal alone. So she found a partner. Iris looked at him. The partner is a Cole Group industry fund. Cole frowned slightly. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Edward Cole approved it personally. And Vivian doesn't know the partner is the Cole Group. She's been negotiating through intermediaries for 3 rounds. She only knows it's a European capital group with deep pockets. Cole was quiet a moment. What's my father trying to do? He wants you to choose. Iris met his eyes. This deal. Whether to sign or not. The decision is yours. If I don't, Wentworth's acquisition falls through. 2 million in due diligence costs down the drain. Stock drops at least 15%. And if I do, then Vivian finds out she still needed you to stay afloat. Cole's gaze cooled. Which option do you think I'll pick? I don't know. That's why I flew here to ask. Cole didn't answer right away. He turned back to the window. Silent for a long time. Then, softly, but with unmistakable finality, sign it. Iris blinked. You're sure? Yes. Why? I thought you didn't care anymore. I don't. Cole turned to her. His gaze calm. But I care about the 20,000 Wentworth employees. If the deal falls through, stock crashes. The first hit is to the ordinary workers. They didn't do anything wrong. They shouldn't pay for leadership's mistakes. Iris stared at him. Then she smiled. You know the man standing here right now. That's what a true Cole heir looks like. Cole didn't respond. Just raised his glass and lightly clinked hers. Keep it quiet. Don't let her know it was me. You're really going to never let her know? No need. His voice was flat. Some debts. Once paid, are paid. No need to keep the ledger in front of the debtor. 1 month later, Wentworth Group successfully acquired the German industrial automation company. The signing was in Berlin. Vivian stood at the podium, shaking hands with the partner representatives, smiling appropriately. But only she knew, the entire deal had gone too smoothly. Unnaturally so. The counterparty barely pushed on key terms. The valuation was 5% below market expectations. In cross-border M&A, that was almost impossible. Back at the hotel, she had her team investigate the partner's background. 3 days later, the results came back. In the LP list of the partner fund, 2 characters appeared: Cole. Vivian stared at those 2 characters for a long time. Then she called Iris. Was it him? Iris was silent for a few beats. You figured it out. Who else would help me this quietly? Where is he? I don't know. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Vivian gripped the phone. Her knuckles white. Thank him for me. Tell him yourself. He won't answer my calls. Then don't call. Iris's voice softened but held its edge. Vivian. He didn't help you so you could thank him. Then why? Because he's Cole. He never did things for thanks. Not at Wentworth. Not now. Vivian hung up, stood by the hotel window, and looked out at Berlin's nightscape. Tears slid silently down her face. She finally understood. Cole helped her not because he still loved her. Not because he wanted to reconcile. Because he was simply that kind of person. When he left, he'd locked down the last 13 core files. 6 months later, when she needed it most, he'd quietly pulled the strings for her. Then he left no name. Asked for nothing. Gave her no chance to make it up. That was the cruelest goodbye. Not hate. Not revenge. But treating her like just another person who needed help. And then moving on. In his heart, she was no different from a stranger. 1 year later. Beijing. Cole Group headquarters. Cole officially took over as president of Cole Group China. His European performance had been outstanding. And Edward Cole finally entrusted the domestic business to him. On his first day, he made a move that rocked the business world. Announcing the Cole Group's full-scale entry into the industrial internet sector. Initial investment, $50 billion. At the press conference, a reporter asked, Mr. Cole, you've been running European operations. Why is your first major move on returning to China focused on industrial internet? Cole smiled at the camera. Because I have some valuable experience in this field. It taught me that a nation's industrial foundation cannot be held by others. Core technology must be independently controlled. Some in the audience caught the deeper meaning. But no one pressed. Everyone knew Cole's 3 years at Wentworth were the most guarded chapter of his career. He didn't bring it up, no one dared ask. After the conference, Cole returned to his office and found an envelope on his desk. No return address. Just his name. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten card. The script neat and restrained. Cole, congratulations on coming home. I know you might not want to see my name. But I wanted to write this. Not to intrude. Just to tell you something. The system you left at Wentworth is still running. The tech team says it's the cleanest code they've ever seen. Every line has comments. Every interface is documented. Every module has a backup plan. They said the person who wrote this code must have been a very gentle person. Because even when he left, he was thinking of the people who'd take over. I didn't understand before. Now I do. Thank you. Not from me. From Wentworth's 20,000 employees. Wishing you all the best, Vivian. Cole read the card. Was quiet for a while. Then folded it back into the envelope. He opened his desk drawer. Placed it inside. Inside the drawer was something else. A faded photo. From the industry summit 7 years ago. Vivian on stage. Speaking. That was the first time he'd seen her. Back then. There'd been a light in her eyes. Back then. He'd had expectations. He looked at the photo for a few seconds. Then he placed the envelope on top of it and closed the drawer. He never replied to that letter. Some stories. The best ending is stopping where they should. 3 months later. Wentworth Group Annual Technology Conference. Vivian, as CEO, attended the tech department's internal meetings for the first time. She sat in the audience, listening as the tech leads discussed architecture plans, algorithm optimizations, and security strategies. A strange sense of déjà vu washed over her. A year ago at this time, she'd been scrambling after Polaris's collapse. A year later, Wentworth's tech infrastructure was completely renewed. New systems, new architecture, new teams. Everything was good. Except the one who'd written that code was gone. After the meeting, Victor approached. Hesitant. Then spoke. President 1. There's something I think you should know. What? Before Cole left. He left something with me. Victor pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase. With handwriting on it, for Vivian 1, Cole. He said to give it to you after a year. Why a year? He said a year would be enough for you to stabilize the company. By then, you'd be able to read it without it affecting your judgment. Vivian took the envelope. Her fingers trembling slightly. Back in her office. She closed the door. Took several deep breaths. And opened the seal. Inside was a stack of A4 paper. The first page. A letter in Cole's handwriting. Neat and clean. Just like his code. Vivian. By the time you read this, I'll have been gone a year. A year is enough for you to calm down. And long enough for me to say what I need to say. First, I don't hate you. I never did. You gave me 3 years to do what I wanted. The results weren't what I'd hoped. But that was my choice. Not your fault. Second, there are things you probably didn't know. I chose to join Wentworth not because the company was great, but because of you. At that summit 7 years ago. You on that stage made me think you were someone worth working with. I wasn't wrong. You are an excellent leader. You have vision, guts, decisiveness. Your only shortcoming is not understanding technology deeply enough. That's not your fault. Different fields. I regret only one thing, not learning earlier how to communicate what I was doing in a way you could see. I always assumed that if I did good work, you'd see it. I forgot that there's too much you couldn't see. That's not your fault. It's mine. I thought silence was strength. But silence gave way to misunderstanding. Finally. Something that might sound sentimental. Those 3 years. Even with low pay and being unseen. I never regretted them. Because I was doing what I loved. Code. Systems. Problem solving. Those are things I genuinely love. Being able to use your passion to hold up a company's core. That itself is a kind of luck. So don't feel you owe me anything. We don't owe each other. We just took different paths. Be well, Cole. Vivian finished reading. Tears blurring her vision. She laid her head on the desk and cried for a long time. Not from sadness. It was something else. Like finally receiving an explanation that had come too late. Like making peace with her stubborn past self. She wiped her eyes. Folded the letter back into the envelope. Then she opened her computer. Created a new folder. She named it Cole, Wentworth's Eternal Founder. She scanned the letter and archived it. She collected the Polaris development logs. Technical proposals. Code comments. All of it. She'd leave these for everyone at Wentworth in the future. So they'd know, once. There was a person who spent 3 years building the foundation of a company. And when he left, he took nothing. Just a potted plant and a thermos. Epilogue. 2 years later. Shenzhen. Huiqiangbai. In an unremarkable corner cafe. Cole sat by the window. Typing code on his laptop. He rarely coded personally anymore. But sometimes, when the itch came, he'd find a quiet spot and write a few lines. For him, coding wasn't work. It was relaxation. Some people fish. Some run. He wrote code. Clean. Precise. Logical. Right was right. Wrong was wrong. No complicated twists. The cafe door opened. A woman in a beige trench coat walked in and came directly to his table. He looked up. Startled. How did you find me here? Iris took off her sunglasses and smiled. You forgot that your schedule passes through my assistant's hands. That's your assistant's information. Not yours. I bribed her with bubble tea. You win. Iris ordered an Americano and glanced at his screen. Still coding. Just messing around. Who for? No one. Just for fun. A pause. Then Iris said, Vivian's getting married. Cole's fingers paused briefly. Then resumed. Oh. That's it. Should I be setting off fireworks or drowning my sorrows? I thought you'd have some kind of reaction. I do have a reaction. Cole stopped typing and leaned back. Looking out the window. I'm happy for her. Really? Really? His tone was calm. She deserves to be happy. What about you? Me. Cole smiled. I'm fine like this. Iris looked at him and felt something had really changed. 2 years ago. There'd been an invisible weight in his bearing. Something he couldn't let go. Now he was relaxed. Like a bird that had shed all its baggage and could fly freely. You know. Sometimes I envy you. She said. What for? For being able to truly let go. Cole took a sip of his coffee and said nothing. Let go. It had taken him 3 full years to learn how. Every day of those 3 years. He'd told himself, don't hope. Don't expect. Don't fantasize that she'll see you. But he'd kept hoping. Expecting. Fantasizing. Until the last of those hopes was shattered by your position is worth that much. Then he truly understood, some people's worlds you'll never enter. Not because you're not good enough. Because their door was never open to you from the start. And now, he no longer wanted to enter that door. Because he'd found his own. Here. Iris pulled an envelope from her bag. What's this? Vivian's wedding invitation. She asked me to give it to you. Cole looked at the envelope. Didn't reach for it. She asked you. Yes. She said she knows you might not come. But she wanted you to know. Why? She said, because you're the most important person who passed through her life. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he reached out and took the envelope. He didn't open it. Just put it in his bag. I'll think about it. Iris didn't press. She knew whether he went or not no longer mattered. What mattered was that he could face the past without flinching. The wedding day. Vivian in a white gown under a flower arch, her smile radiant. The groom was an investor she'd known for 2 years. Gentle. Kind. And good to her. The ceremony went smoothly. Guests toasted. Laughed. Celebrated. Only Iris noticed that when they exchanged rings, Vivian's gaze flickered briefly to the empty seat in the last row. On that seat sat a bouquet of white roses. No name. No card. Just flowers. Vivian looked at the bouquet. Her eyes glistening. But her smile held. She knew who'd sent it. She also knew he wouldn't come. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was, he'd finally let go. And she could finally start new. After the reception, Iris received a message from Cole. One line, did the flowers arrive? Iris replied, yes. She loved them. A long pause. Then Cole replied, good. Iris looked at those 3 words and smiled. She remembered a saying, "Some people are only meant to walk part of the road with you. But that part of the road, it's enough to light your whole life." For Vivian, Cole was that person. And for Cole, Vivian had been too. They just met at the wrong time. One trying to prove himself, one running forward at full speed. Neither stopped to truly see the other. When they finally did stop, they were already too far apart. But that was okay. They'd both become better versions of themselves along the way. That was enough. 3 months later. Switzerland. A small town at the foot of the Alps. Cole sat on the terrace of his wooden cabin. A cup of hot tea in hand. A book on his lap. Snow-capped peaks stretched into the distance. A quiet lake lay before him. He was on vacation. No work. No meetings. No emails. Just books, tea, and scenery. His phone buzzed. Iris. Wentworth's Q3 earnings are out. New revenue record. The tech center, as an independent unit, is now the company's second largest profit center. Victor says they've iterated 2 versions based on your architecture. Performance increased by 40%. Cole read it. A faint smile touching his lips. He typed back, "Great. Congratulations from me." He set the phone to silent. Put it in his pocket. Then he picked up his tea and looked back at the snowy peaks. The wind carried scents of pine and fresh snow. He took a deep breath. A sense of peace settling over him that he'd never felt before. He no longer needed anyone's approval. No longer had to prove anything to anyone. He was simply himself. Cole. Someone who'd once written very good code. Loved someone he shouldn't have. And walked away clean. This story. This was enough. That concludes today's story. Don't forget to subscribe and comment.